Welcome to Sounding Board. This is a weekly program completely produced by club members of Soroptimist International of Novato. Do you know we've been doing this for 20 years now, and we really do enjoy it. The mission of the organization is to help improve the lives of women and girls, both locally and globally. We make a real serious attempt at making or planning our sounding board programs to kind of address that mission of improving the lives of women and girls. Today, my guest fits right into that mission, as we have decided to talk about the investment challenges that mature women have, depending upon the various circumstances in their life. And so I've invited Sam Crump, who happens to be my financial advisor, and he is with Edward Jones, located on San Marin Drive over by Harvest Market. Very convenient for me. That's what I really like. And he also has a special background of having been an attorney, so that makes him doubly valuable to me. So, Sam, tell us, why do we need to be even thinking about financial planning?
Great. Well, thank you, Carol, for having me. Financial planning is important really for anybody at any stage in their life, but keeping with our theme of investing for the mature woman, especially important for them. Because if you think about it, and when we say a mature woman, we're saying somebody in their later years, probably going through some transitions. Those transitions might be empty nest syndrome. Maybe the kids are out of the house now and finances have changed, their budget has changed. Maybe they've gone through retirement themselves or their spouse, or unfortunately, maybe they've gone through a divorce or even the death of their husband. And so now they're alone and having to figure these things out on their own if they haven't done them before. So the financial planning is a critical thing for their stage of life.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we have all kinds of things like risk versus rewards and things like that to think about. Help us think through some of those things.
Sure. Well, when we talk about risk versus reward, that's one of the classic terminologies for investing and understanding what to invest in, what not to invest in. It depends on how much you have, how old you are, how much time you have left to invest, making sure you don't outlive your money. So it's really important in the mature woman to be thinking about investments and who's going to help them with their financial affairs, but more importantly, their whole estate plan, their legal advisor, an attorney, their tax issues, and of course a financial advisor. So those three we like to think of as their team to help them figure out what their needs are.
So I found you. You're one of my team, huh?
I'm
So
part
I've got
of
to
the
start
team.
working on the other two. But tell me, why do I need to have an attorney be involved?
Well, sure. So the reason that team is so important is if you think about those three members of your team, they can really help you cover just about everything that you're going to have to deal with financially, legally, and of course your taxes. And each one's going to have the special skills in those areas. And very rarely we have one person that can handle all of them. So the attorney, for example, is going to be important to help them with estate planning and making sure that the woman has a will or a living trust. And we can talk some more about that in a moment. Making sure that they have perhaps a health care directive, which means what do I want to happen to me health-wise when I'm unable to make decisions for myself. And of course the tax planning, the CPA is, and we're coming up on tax time here, so that's very important. The tax person is going to make sure that they're complying with the law, but also not paying more than they're supposed to pay or need to pay. And the financial advisor is there to help them with investments, mutual funds, bonds, things of that nature, and stocks, of course, and also can help them with life insurance and long-term care insurance.
Let me back up for a minute. When you talk about estate planning, I've always been bothered by the word estate. Does that mean a rich person with a big, huge estate? What does that mean, estate?
Right. No, certainly not. And I know people seem to think of that because we tend to think of estates where you drive in through the gates and so forth. An estate is just a legal term. Really, anybody has an estate. And it's everything that you have, everything that you owe, everything that you own. And it becomes especially important when you're planning for your estate in your later years, but also especially upon your death. And then people who you left behind have to sort out what you had, what you owe, and where did you want what's left over, where did you want it to go. And so proper estate planning with that legal team and the tax team and the financial advisor can help you do that and get your affairs in order for your estate.
For your estate, I see. Okay, so and that kind of goes into when you die, or if and when you die, then it makes it just a little bit easier for everybody else, and I guess.
Well, absolutely, and I think we'll come back to talking about, for
Mm-hmm.
example, some details like a living trust and things. But
Ah,
yes,
yeah.
you're really doing a favor not only to yourself by getting your affairs in order and planning your estate legally, financially, but you're really doing a favor to those that you leave behind. Because if you don't do these things, then those that you leave behind, they're going to find that proverbial shoebox or shopping bag with all of your affairs in there disorganized, and that's unfortunate.
I know situations where it's really brought out the worst in family members too,
Sure.
and that's I think the hardest part.
Absolutely.
It's really sad. Okay, well, I have a CPA, and she happens to do all my taxes, but why did you put that person? I see them as that kind of a role, but why would you put a CPA in that mix of the team that helps me with my financial planning?
Sure. Well, your taxes are a critical part of your proper estate planning. And so the attorney, again, the attorney and the financial advisor are typically not going to have those skills that a CPA and sometimes they're called other things. There's enrolled agents and things of that nature, but someone who's qualified to handle and prepare your taxes and advise you on your taxes. Taxes, as we all know, have become very complicated these days, and so they really could use the advice of a professional who can guide you so that you're doing them properly, you're not paying more than you need to, and that you've really got your money working for you. So what you're not paying to the government, what you've got left over, then you can go to your financial advisor and say, help me make this money work for me.
And I suppose part of it is also helping you keep decent records instead of like the shoebox like you're talking about.
Well, absolutely,
Yeah.
sure. And you can only do a good job of doing your taxes if throughout the year you've done a good job of organizing them, keeping your receipts, and understanding what's deductible, what's not deductible. So sure, a professional tax advisor can help you with those things.
And in today's world, more than just the paper receipts, everything's online, and they have all. I know they always we take things over to them with in a what do you call a thumb drive, and all the records are there. So I suppose they're keeping those records in case something should happen that I wouldn't be able to find my records. I suppose that's a backup.
That's great,
plan.
a backup plan, and if everything is in your computer, that's a good point that you're raising. It's really important to have that backed up somewhere else because we all know computers crash, and how many times have we heard that story where somebody said they lost everything. So if you're one of those people that keeps it all in your computer, make sure you have some sort of backup to that.
That's true. Or if there was a disaster, and a flood and wiped out
Sure.
your, everything. Well, okay, now we've taken care of the attorney, we've taken care of the CPA, we come down now to the investment advisor, and that's you. So tell us how that comes about for the mature woman. What are you there for in
Right.
that team?
Well, so often, unfortunately, I think, and again, talking about mature women, in our society, it's too often the woman has abdicated sometimes the financial decisions, investing to the husband. Well, first of all, if you're still married and everything, that's terrific, and you shouldn't abdicate it. You should be educating yourself and being involved in the decision making. I think too often the wife doesn't know what's happening and doesn't know what they have, what they owe, and so then if they do find themselves in a divorce situation or in a widow situation, then they really don't know where to begin because that discussion didn't happen beforehand. They didn't educate themselves about what was going on. So the first thing is to really educate yourself. Go in and talk to a financial advisor. The vast majority of them, you should be able to do that with no obligation and no cost. Just to sit down and say, I need some help in understanding what this is all about.
So they can ask for a free, basically not expect to pay for that first.
Most times, and
Right.
you should be able to keep asking until you find one that will.
Oh, good. Okay.
And so that's a good place to start. Don't let fear stop you from doing that. And then next is, it's so easy these days with the internet and computers. People can get online, and yes, you can invest your money yourself and do that online really very easily, but it can also be a trap for the unwary if you really don't know what you're doing, because there's a lot that goes into it. Making sure that your investments are properly balanced and diversified. There's over 7,000 mutual funds out there, which is a basket of individual stocks, and if you don't know what you're doing, you might be investing in the wrong things at the wrong time, and your needs change over time. So that's where a good financial advisor can help you to lay out a plan and stick to it. Because as you know, we've been through some very difficult times recently. We had one of the worst stock market crashes in a long time just a few years ago. But people that had a plan and stuck with it it's come back very nicely. And so that's usually good advice, is to invest in quality investments and stick with it through thick and thin.
Good. Well, let's play with a couple of scenarios here, and these are kind of real life scenarios. And let's pretend like my husband happened to have a life-threatening illness, and all of a sudden I'm panicked, I'm scared. What should I do?
Sure. Well, the first thing is to have that discussion that we just talked about, and say, when you sit down, make sure that you understand what your combined estate is comprised of. What do you have? Do you have life insurance? Do you have long-term care insurance that's going to help you with your health needs when he is gone? What are the plans for the children? What are the plans for, depending on where you are in life, for their college? Those sorts of things. Getting a health care directive that I mentioned earlier, so that you'll be able to make decisions for him when and if he is unable to do so. And then, of course, yes, the investments. It's important to understand what are those, because I've had several situations where the client has come in and said they lost their spouse, and well, he knew what he was doing, and I just want to leave everything the way he had it invested. Well, things have changed now, so that's probably not going to be appropriate. And so I understand that they want to keep it just the way it was, but we really need to look at what are your needs now, because now it's just you, and what's going on with your whole estate, your house and your expenses, your budget, and your life expectancy, and making sure, again, that you don't outlive your money.
Let's take another scenario here. What if I happen to be a woman who just loves technology, and I love the stock market, and maybe I'm around 65 years old, and I've just recently inherited some money, and I'm just having so much fun with this day trading. So should I follow my passion and invest in technology, and what should I do?
Sure, the passionate investor. Well, I've
So you have a name for those people, huh?
Right. I've seen clients like that too, and the great thing about that is the person, they have some means to invest, they have some funds available, and they're passionate about a particular sector. And here you mentioned technology, and we live near Silicon Valley, and you hear about Apple stock and all these different things.
And you have all kinds of tips every day. You have tips from your friends. You know?
But the danger in that is when someone goes with simply what they know, but then they put all their eggs in one basket, and so they're all just invested in technology stocks, let's say, in that scenario, and they're not properly diversified. So if that particular industry takes a serious downturn, they're not going to be able to weather that very well. So that's what a good plan and a good financial advisor can help you do, is making sure it's fine to invest in some passion areas that you have, but making sure that you're properly diversified and across the different sectors, and that you have a plan, that you stick with it.
To me, well, I have my personal biases on day trading, but to me it's like kind of going to Vegas or something like that. And if you're the kind of person who likes to go to Vegas, you just make sure you have that amount of money, and you're never going to spend more than that. Just have a little bit in your little pocket, and that's it. Anyway, let's take another scenario. Say I'm 35 years old, and I provide the primary source of income to my husband and children. Is there anything I can do to prepare financially if something were to happen to me?
Certainly. So we're talking about the breadwinner situation, and if that is a woman who is the breadwinner, the primary breadwinner for the family, that's great. And I've again had clients that come in and they actually maybe have a good income, but they really haven't given thought to the what if scenario. What if something happens to me? So I've had clients that are making significant incomes, they have children, and they don't have any life insurance, or they have minimal life insurance provided through their work. And I have to ask them,
medical insurance sometimes. I've known people who don't even have medical insurance.
And say, well, what would happen if you weren't here all of a sudden? Because accidents do happen, unforeseen things happen. How is that mortgage going to get paid? Is your spouse going to be able to replace your income? Oftentimes not. What are your children going to do? So having life insurance, having long-term care insurance, if you have an illness or your spouse has an illness, and providing planning in that way. College savings plans. Have you started putting away for that in case you're not here when the time comes?
Right. Okay, another scenario. Let's say I have a small IRA from a 401k at my previous employer, and I've just changed jobs. What's the best way to grow my investment?
Sure. So a couple of terms there you use. You use the 401k, and a lot of people know that term. If you work at an employer, typically a larger employer is going to have a 401k. If you're at that employer, that's great. You should maximize whatever you can invest in that. There's usually some good matching from the employer. Now your question is, when something happens, you leave that employment, if you're laid off, you retire, whatever, then you have an opportunity. And too often, people leave their money in that 401k at the plan at that company, even though they're no longer working there. That's not a very good idea in our opinion, mostly because of control issues. You would like to be able to control your money and your investments, I would assume, and you're going to have a lot more control over your funds and over your investment decisions if you do what we call a rollover, and that term is out there a lot these days.
Rollover. I see
Roll
that on the
over
ads.
that investment from a 401k typically into an IRA, an individual retirement account. And again, you can do that on your own, or you can do that with the help of an investment advisor or a financial advisor.
Now, the process of rolling the money over means then that you have no tax consequences. You're rolling it over from one kind of investment to a like kind of investment?
Typically, yes. For the most part, that would be the idea, is that there would not be a tax liability by moving from that 401k to the IRA if done properly in the right amount of time, etc. Then there would be no tax. It's still going to be tax deferred in most cases. You're going to pay taxes later in life when you're in a lower bracket. So, yes, you want to be careful about that. You don't want to just take your money out of the 401k and do nothing, because that most likely will create tax liabilities for you.
A serious one, from my understanding, yeah. Okay, well, forget about the scenarios. I'm going to be selfish for a moment. Say, I'm going to take advantage of your time here, and I'm going to talk about myself. So I'm a healthy person, and my husband's extremely healthy, and we have a good life. Everything's fine. The world is wonderful. All our dependents are gone. We have nothing to worry about there. I've got my CPA taking care of my taxes, and I don't have an attorney, though. That's interesting. And now I found you. So what should I be thinking about?
Sure. Well, that's all the things that we've been talking about come to, this discussion in that scenario, because those people definitely need to be talking about having a living trust, and maybe this is a good time for me to bring that up. We've mentioned that a couple of times. So really anybody should consider and seek the advice of a counsel about a living trust, but for the most part it's one of the few ways that you can actually avoid probate, meaning when you die, that your estate that we talked about earlier does not have to go into the court system, which can be expensive, it can be time consuming, it can be tedious. And by having a living trust and having that properly set up during your lifetime, that's why we call it a living trust, then upon your death, it's much easier for those you leave behind, your heirs, to settle your estate and distribute it to the people that you decided. And that's the other important part of it, is you're laying out a plan. What kind of charitable giving do you want to give to your university or your church, that sort of thing? And then what are you leaving to your spouse, your children, etc.?
How is a living trust then different from just a will?
Well, a will is going to have to be probated in the court system. So it's,
and probated means?
The court oversight. The court's going to ask for accounting. The court's going to ask for documentation. The court's going to have to approve the distribution. And this can take months and even years. So
I thought you just had a will, it was all taken care of. And if you had it signed and witnessed and all that business.
Right.
So it still has to go before a court.
That's going to require probate. So a living trust is really one of the few ways you can avoid that process. So I highly recommend that to the couple that you're describing.
That's me.
Exactly. So I highly recommend that. And again, talking with your CPA, talking with your financial advisor, getting that health care directive in case something happens. And especially, I think you mentioned maybe this couple that you described doesn't have children. Have you really thought through who's going to take care of the survivor of the two of you? Typically if you're married, one spouse can take care of.
That is a worry of mine. Myself, I don't have any children. My husband does, but they might be mad at me at that time. Who knows? Life changes. And if I'm a little old crotchety woman all by myself, that does worry me. Who's going to take care of me?
So it's important to talk to your spouse, and if you have children, talk to your children what that's like, because if it's a mature woman we're talking about, you may be taking care of your parents right now, or maybe you've had that experience.
I have.
It can get very difficult, and especially if their mental capacity starts to diminish, their physical ability starts to diminish, and then it can become too late to have that conversation. So that's where long-term care insurance can be very helpful. That's becoming very common, because Medicare and those sorts of things is not going to provide much of the care that you might want, especially in-home, which is becoming very common these days.
Interesting. Well, then I have to come and talk to you then about some of these things, don't I?
Sure.
We'll have to make an appointment and follow up on this. I definitely need to get clear. Did we talk enough about living trust? Are we clear
I think
on
so,
that?
yeah. I think
for our
it's
audience
pretty
here
clear.
too?
Really important thing for people to, and again, fear, there's a lot of misconceptions of what those are about, how much it costs, and so forth. You should be able to find an attorney and ask some questions at little or no cost, and I highly recommend that.
Now, let's talk about an attorney just for a minute. We have an attorney who takes care of other issues in our life, more like leases and stuff like that. But what kind of an attorney should I be looking for? Is a good friend a good attorney?
Many attorneys today it has become rather specialized, and so you rarely will one attorney be able to do everything for you. If they're handling your business affairs, they may not handle what we call estate planning. So you're looking for an estate planning attorney, someone that advertises that they do wills and trusts, that sort of thing, and that's who you would want to talk to, because the laws are changing all the time. You want to make sure that this is an area that they don't just dabble in, but they really do.
Okay, so it is important to get somebody who specializes then.
Of course, yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, and there are plenty of those around, I'm sure, around here
Yes.
in this neighborhood. Well, I used to see that old bumper sticker that said, something to the effect of, I want everything to work out to be zero at the end of my life, or I'm spending my kids' inheritance and all that kind of thing. Is there any truth to any of that? I mean, is that something we should aim for?
Well, that's tough for me to answer. That's different for everybody. I will say in my past life as an attorney, I did encounter a number of situations, as you can imagine, where people were coming in and disinheriting children and things like that for whatever reason. I called it the dysfunctional family syndrome. And those are all very unfortunate. But really, to your question, do you want to try to, on the day that you die, you've spent your last penny and you've left nothing? Well, I don't think that's how most people live. I think most people would take pride in leaving something to their children. But even more importantly, the phrase I've used a couple of times here is making sure that you don't outlive your money. We don't have a crystal ball.
That we outlive, I see.
Make sure we don't outlive our money.
In other words, have nothing left.
If you run out of money, and that's what a financial advisor we can run some scenarios to say, here's what you have, here's how much longer we think you have to go, and making sure that your money is working, investing, and we can identify any shortfall that might be there. Life expectancy these days, the general rule is 90 years old. It didn't used to be that way 20 years ago. So people are living longer through technology and medicine, and making sure that your investments are working and the money's going to be there, so you're not a burden to everybody else. And nobody wants to be that. So we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know when we're going to die, thank goodness. But there's certain things we can control, and that is getting organized, getting our affairs in order, getting properly invested, and putting enough away now so it'll be there for us when we need it.
I have another question. We didn't talk about this, so I hope I'm not throwing you off on this. But, it seems like when you make out a will or something like that, you're always asked to identify an executor. Is there such a thing as a professional executor for the will, or do you just ask a friend? Is this important to do if you have a living trust?
Sure. They do. There are people that you can name, institutions and so forth as executors. Most commonly, you're going to name somebody you know, and typically you're going to name 2 or 3 people in case the first 1 or 2 say no or are no longer around. So in a will, we call it an executor, someone that's going to manage your affairs for you upon your death and take care of figuring everything out. And in a living trust, we call it a successor trustee. And typically,
successor trustee. I will
right.
write that one down.
And you might even, it's very common to have co-trustees. So you might even name a couple of people that act together if they're able to do so, and sort of checks and balances, if you will.
And typically, your husband or spouse might be the executor, but if you've outlived that person,
right.
then you have to think of another person.
Can be children, and then sometimes people don't want it to be their children, or they don't have children. So and then it can be trusted friends and so forth. But yes, and then ultimately you can name trust departments of banks and other financial institutions.
Now, if someone were to ask me to be an executor for their estate, does that become a burden? Is that something I should worry about having to be a burden on me eventually? Is it something I wouldn't want to do?
Quite possibly. That's going to depend on everybody's unique circumstances. First of all, you should show your appreciation and thank the person that asked you, because that means they trust you quite a bit.
Exactly.
And they consider you a very good friend. But yes, it's something you should really think about whether you're going to be able to handle that. Now, as an executor or as a successor trustee, you don't have to be all alone in doing that. You don't have to have gone to law school or something, because typically you're going to go and get the help of those people we keep talking about, the attorney, the CPA and the
Got
financial
it,
advisor.
got it.
They will help you in settling the estate. But ultimately, you'll be the decision maker because you're the executor or the trustee.
Interesting. Okay, I was always curious about that. There's so many, and you'd think I'd know some of these things, but
Yeah.
over the years. But there are some things I just have not been all that clear about.
Sure.
Well, Sam, we probably bring this to close in a while, but are there any last-minute thoughts? In summary, we've talked an awful lot about an awful lot of things, and we've hit the highlights. You and I have talked about that, and we talked about maybe you could go on forever talking about a lot of these issues, but are there some specific topics you'd like to kind of talk to in detail for our viewing audience?
Sure, Carol. Well, in closing, what I would say is stop procrastinating. So
Stop procrastinating.
our
Okay.
theme was investing for the mature woman. It's never too late to start getting educated. It's never too late to start investing and get your money working for you. But don't put it off any longer. Start. Open your books, open your accounts, get investing because on all of these things, whether it's the legal, the tax, or the investment side of it, putting it off is not going to help. And you need to address these things, whether you're still married, whether you're widowed or divorced on your own, but you need to take responsibility for it and not just leave it in the closet, literally or figuratively. And from an investment standpoint, as a financial advisor, we know the studies have shown what a difference even just a few years can make in terms of really getting invested and putting money in that individual retirement account or the 401k or just investing in general, even if it's not a retirement account. So
Why is it so easy for us to put it off? It just seems like we don't want to deal with these issues, do we?
well, right. It takes a little bit of work, but it's important. What could be more important? And so it's time to get started on that, and don't leave it to others and assume that it's all just going to work out in the end. Because I think we all have a goal of being self-sufficient and not a burden on the government or our families and what have you.
Well, I've been putting off this thing about a living trust for quite a while, a number of years, and this conversation has helped me to hopefully bring that to a little higher priority for me to get it done. I hope so. I think we had also talked about it's probably time to sit down and have what-if talks with your family. What if this happens? What if that happens? What would happen? And talk through some issues like that.
Yeah, it's not fun to do, but it's important, and I think that everybody will feel better about it that they've had the discussion.
Well, we're glad you arrived in town, Sam.
Good.
I'm really glad you were here today to help us, and I hope this has really addressed a lot of issues or clarified or opened some minds up, and to feel that people should get a team together of what was it you said, the attorney, the CPA, and the investment advisor, and get a real solid team that works for you yourself as a mature woman. So with that, I think we're wrapped, and I would like to thank you, the viewing audience, for being here. And I would like to thank Novato Public Access Television for always being here for our Novato community. And thank you, Club Sisters, for being behind the scenes and producing this program.